Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the second day of racing at the European Cyclocross Championships in Middelkerke. I just came back from Middelkerke and with me here to discuss it is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. What a race, Issam. What a day of racing, and that's mainly because of the final race because wow. Honestly, I can't remember the last time we had a championship like this. Can you? We had last year a interesting battle, but it wasn't nearly as back and forth as this one. The World Championships in Hogerheide with Van der Poel and Van Aert come to mind, but a big open battle like this? It's been a very long time that we've seen this in the men's category. On the women's side, we've had phenomenal battles. Oostende comes to mind, Fayetteville with Brand Vos, but this, on the men's side, I feel like it's been quite a while.
I cannot recall in my memory a championship that we had like this in a while. And you know that you enter the last lap and you don't know who is going to win, or at least you have several riders that actually have a shot of winning, that showed something in the race of you know, potentially having that last kick to win it. And it was it was by far the best race that we had this season. And man, if there are going to be races this season that are going to top this one, I mean that's going to be a hell of a race, I guess.
Sometimes you're just thankful that Van Aert and Van der Poel are not there yet, because in their era of World Championship racing, it's been mostly solos. They had a few battles. One World Championship that came to mind, and I still remember quite vividly being very tense with somewhat of an open scenario, was the World Championships in Zolder 2016. Else 2014, that was Stibar Nijs, mainly a mano-a-mano battle. More open was Louisville 2013, eventually turned into Van Toerenhout versus Nijs. But today it was not Nijs Senior, but it was Nijs Junior with a very big role in this battle. And let's dive into a quick summary of the race, because it was Toon Aerts who had the fastest start, but the opening lap was not that quick. We crossed the line at the end of the first lap with Italian, Swedish riders hanging at the back of the leading group. There had only been a few riders dropped. It was pretty much still the entire pack. It was not that large of a field starting here in Middelkerke. Slowly but surely, the race got strangled apart. We had the beach sections. It was Ronhaar at the front. We had Nieuwhuis briefly at the front, but it was quite clear that Nieuwhuis didn't have the legs. He quickly started falling backwards. Mike van Toerenhout was doing a lot of work, and as a result, we slowly but surely thinned out the leading group to some 8 to 9 riders. In the third lap, Toon Aerts placed an attack. He opened the gap, but then in a curious moment, he needed to go into the pits. He lost quite some time at the halfway point of the race, because at the moment he went into the pits, there was an attack. We got 4 leaders. We had Pim Ronhaar, Michael van Toerenhout, Joran Wieseuren and Thibaut Nijs. Thibaut Nijs always in the wheels, barely ever hitting the wind at that point in the race. For the most part, it seemed like we were going to have these 4 riders decide the title. It was Ronhaar attacking, it was Van Toerenhout attacking. Those two were mainly countering each other, with Wieseuren and Nijs most of the time needing to chase a bit after the beach section. However, things turned around because the pace slowed down a little bit at the front. The pace had been very high. It had been an explosive race. It was time to catch a breather to load up for the final lap. And just at the moment that they slowed down a little bit at the front, Toon Aerts put in his fastest lap of the race until then. He closed the gap, came across. That was a sign of what was to come, because the penultimate lap also was not that fast, which allowed all of a sudden a bigger group of riders to come back. Cameron Mason from those riders was the only one to still feature in the battle for the podium positions in the final lap. The final lap was more of what we have seen so far. Vivid fighting for positions, dive bombs, Ronhaar, Nijs. Everyone wanted to reach the beach first. But it was, in the end, Toon Aerts who opened a tiny gap there. Nijs needed to react on the dune. He closed the gap, and still more jockeying for the positions. It was a tough battle. Nijs took the lead just after the second pit zone, coming over this long dune to the top, but he couldn't keep it up. It was Toon Aerts who took the lead on the first corner onto the tarmac. He took the final straight. First, Thibaut Nys in the wheel. Many, myself included, expected Nys to still come across, but it was a vague sign. The fact that Nys didn't keep the lead, he didn't have the legs anymore. It was Toon Aerts who sprinted to his second European title, 9 years after his first one in Pontchâteau, with Nys coming in for second, and Viseur beating Ronhaar for third. Issam, something strange has to have happened in the universe of sports, because not only is Toon Aerts all of a sudden a clutch rider, I'm quite convinced that he must have passed his choking gene to Oscar Piastri, because all of a sudden Piastri is here choking the World Championship lead in Formula 1. He can't keep his car on the track or outside of other cars to save his life. Toon Aerts today, perfect execution, final lap, stays calm, finishes off in ice-cold fashion. What a phenomenal ride by the Belgian today. I can't describe it with any other word than phenomenal.
I have to agree. I think it was the right move, and man, I did not expect that from Aerts, I have to say. But when he entered that last corner first, you just saw immediately that could actually be it, and for sure it would not have been illogical if Nys was actually able to get over. Aerts is a strong rider, and he had strong moments, and especially the way how he was able to get himself back into the race was quite impressive, and he was also able to put them under pressure before they entered that last lap. So Aerts was showing a lot of good signs, and those were signs that we did not see this season from him, and that was also why we entered this European Championship thinking, well, what did Toon Aerts actually show us that we can go off from and be like, well, he could be a dangerous contender today, and He showed himself in true colors. It was incredible. But the racing itself was also very good, because I think the riders were able to put each other under pressure, but they were never really able to get away from each other. Like, it was that you had very strong moments from Van Toerenhout. You had a strong moment from Viseur, who was able to get into the race. Ronhaar was very strong. Nys was definitely someone who was in the waiting room somewhat. He was, he was taking it from a, back seat kind of position, just looking at the race developing and thinking, well, maybe my moment is going to come. And it almost seemed to be that way if you look at that last lap, the way he was able to pick his moment there at the end of that lap. But there was one guy behind him, and he surprised him. I don't even think only surprised him, but it was also nice. Was probably just trying to prepare his legs for the sprint, and Aerts was like, I can already sprint, man. This is all going to be for me. I'm going to be the champion here. And it was an incredible race, and I definitely forgot names to mention, because I think there were definitely other riders as well that had a moment in this race. And the course delivered, the riders delivered. It was truly an impressive race, and incredible to watch on the screen for sure.
Let's discuss those riders in a little bit, and for now focus on Toon Aerts, the glorious winner here. I spoke with his entourage afterwards. They said that Toon Aerts was specifically peaking for this race, and kind of attributed his season so far to his seasonal approach being different than others. Toon Aerts was with Lotto on the road, and therefore tried to peak for the Gravel World Championships. I think he finished 11th there from the top of my head. So he was really satisfied with that. But after that, he took a short break. He started his season quite well in Ardooy and Ruddervoorde. That was on the effects of the training for the Gravel World Championships. Then he took it a bit easier. His form declined a bit. He didn't have luck in Overijssel. He didn't race that much. He was training hard, which is why they said he was not as good on the Koppenberg, why he wasn't as fresh in Lokeren. But above all, they said that this week on training, the confidence started to come for Aerts. His values went up, he felt strong, and that they already had the sign, okay, a podium, perhaps a win is possible here in Middelkerke. So that's where they reason from. Toon Aerts himself attributed the win partially in the sprint due to his time with Lotto. He said that with the new coach there, Nicolas Maas, he discovered how to sprint more efficiently. He said in the past he wasn't really sure how to time his sprint, but by doing these specific trainings where his trainer would sometimes let him go too early and sometimes let him go too late in head-to-head 1v1 sprints against slower people, that Toon Aerts could kind of learn how to sprint, something that he never really considered training on. So that was interesting. Myself, what I think kind of plays a role here, Issam, and I'm curious to hear how you think about this. Sometimes I feel with Toon Aerts he races better from the defensive. When he doesn't feel he is strong, or when something has happened that has set him back, he feels better. He's able to kind of lock in more. And I think about Ruddervoorde race this year in which I said that he didn't feel strong, so that's why he kind of sat in the wheels more, and it almost got him a podium there, but he crashed at the end. Now, Muir last year, I think we also discussed it in that podcast, that Toon Aerts, because he was in the defensive, kind of locked in, and only all of a sudden when he was at the front again, he crashes, loses a certain win, and what do we remember? Just like in Ruddervoorde, the crash at the end. But go even further back, go back to when he won the Belgian title against Wout van Aert. That was also a race where he came from the defensive. Only in the penultimate lap there was this huge swing. He went from 30 seconds down to 10, 20 seconds ahead, taking the win there. It feels like Aerts, when he is not under pressure, when he's not thinking about winning a race, he's able to avoid these mistakes. Tactically, he can't make these mistakes because he's not in a position to play stupid attacks, and technically it seems like he's relieved and doesn't feel this pressure and can execute smoothly.
You know, there are certain riders that when the announcer is announcing that the gap is coming down and he's in the lead, they tend to make more mistakes than others, and it must be something that bothers him in a way where he's just not able to execute when it matters, when he is in a position and he starts to think maybe too much about it. It's difficult to get into that because it's hard. You know, I don't have a background in all that, so it's it's hard to judge it, I guess. But it is definitely something. If you look at the events, it seems to be that way, that he is definitely more comfortable in a position where he's not seen as the favorite, where he probably doesn't even see himself as the favorite, and he was in a position in the race where I was thinking, well, that's it. He's not coming back. Even if they come back, he's not going to play a role. And all of a sudden, they were announcing, okay, Toon Aerts is actually coming back. And there he was. And I think that effort was definitely necessary. And was not because the others were slowing down that much. It was also and more because of the fact that he was actually pushing like crazy. Because the others that came after him, the likes of Mason, they probably also, you know, had this. They definitely benefited from the situation up front, that they kind of slowed down a little bit and it became more tactical, I guess, because everyone was somewhat thinking about that last lap, or at least the last two laps, and trying to position themselves well, and there were some critical points in the course where you wanted to be ahead, mainly entering the beach and all that. So I think that it just became a little bit more tactical, and the riders were probably also feeling the race in their legs, because it is a tough course. When you look at it, it's demanding a lot from the bodies of the riders, and to be able to have, you know, all those riders actually so close, I did not expect that, to be honest. I don't really know why it is the case, but I guess it's just how the race developed. And yeah, it again, it was for me interesting to see how it was that close between the riders, and that we actually were able to have I don't know the top five, what the gap was between them, but it was super close. They were all on the start-finish straight when Aerts finished. So yeah, that was incredible to see. It was beautiful almost, and I guess that the viewers also must have enjoyed that, because it was truly a spectacle with a lot of tactics, some elbows left and right, but I think it was all fair play.
The top 5 was in 4 seconds. That because the way that the course is created. It is a hard course, but if you look at the way that the course is built, as soon as you get off that beach, Issam, there's not that much anymore. It still takes quite some time to get to the finish line. A lot of it being tarmac. You get this little climb off the beach, and then they get this little sand section. From there, it's downhill, quite some tarmac, past the pits, this long climb with the headwind, then more tarmac until you get to the start again. From there, there's a phase of some 5 minutes in which there is the opportunity to put each other under pressure. So it did indeed make for great racing. I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. But afterwards, I thought it was interesting to see a different type of dynamic. If I look at the reactions that we've seen on the Instagram post from Cyclocross Social TNT Sports, if we look at the contrast that sets between, for instance, the tone within the Belgian media, it's interesting because this both relates to Toon Aerts, who not too long ago served a 2-year doping suspension for a positive letrozole test. In Belgium, they completely bought into this narrative around Toon Aerts. They first went with the story that Toon Aerts, when he gave this press conference with his big hair, they said, oh, Toon Aerts, he had a supplement, it was dirty, they found an open container which was contaminated, but all the closed ones they tested, they were clean, he's a victim of the system. They went with that narrative. Then afterwards, they shifted the narrative, when Toon Aerts shifted the narrative, to it being some sort of hormones injected into cows around Flamanville, because he and Bossard both tested positive after being in Normandy, when one Google search proved that it's banned in France to use that type of hormone, and it's not been allowed in that area for the last 15 years. So Toon Aerts has served a suspension. My take is he served a suspension, he's back in the sport, whatever. I think he's clean, clean in the sense that he's good to race, not necessarily that he wasn't using doping. He's clear to race, and I'm fine with that because those are the rules of the sport. His post-race interview, I think, was normal, not a middle finger to the UCI, no dirty trash talking or kind of hitting back to them or this is for all the haters, none of that. So that's completely unrelated of Toon Aerts. But if you look at the more international coverage of it and the responses to that outside of Belgium, a lot of it is, this guy Toon Aerts, the former convicted doper, is the one winning. How good is this for the sport? And in Belgium, there's none of that. That was an interesting section. Also interesting, I was on the beach for 2 laps in the middle of the Laurens Sveek fan club, and those people, they must have had a cold shower because at that point they were cheering Issam. They were cheering that Toon Aerts got dropped. They were like, oh yeah, Laurens Sveek is nowhere, but at least Toon Aerts is nowhere either. So they must have had a cold awakening when Toon Aerts took the title. I think, like I said, he's clean to race, and for me that's fine, but I just thought that this contrast in the narratives was very interesting because it's a completely opposite narrative that you see in Belgium as to the international press.
Yeah, and it is somewhat expected, I guess, because I think the Belgian press, in my opinion, dropped the ball in being more, I wouldn't say suspicious, but they should have looked more into the reasons that he was giving and be more critical in a sense. They weren't. And yeah, that kind of leaves the door open, and I feel that it's hard now to mention after every accomplishment of Toon Aerts that he was once caught with letrozole. It is something that has happened, and I definitely do not buy the reasons that were given, or at least I don't think the reasons that were given were clear enough. But in the report as well, there was said that they didn't see that there was intent, and we have to leave it at that, I guess. And it makes it difficult, but it is what it is, and it is hard to judge. He now has a responsibility to keep it clean till the end of his career, and I think that is for him. I think that is for the sport. That would be for the sport more damaging if he was going to be caught again. So I hope that he is able to keep it clean. That would be great for the sport and also for him, I guess. But yeah, I think I want to kind of go on about Nijs, because I felt, his race up until that move on the last lap, it almost looked like, I wouldn't say the perfect race, but he made it almost perfect. And he made that mistake when he was with Ronhaar, and then he had to dismount of his bike, and he had to let both, I think, Viseur and Aerts by on the last lap, and then he had to make that move to try and get back into the lead, which he eventually succeeded in. But was Nijs not that good? There were talks about him not feeling well. There was something with the rib that they had to somewhat tape in or whatever, and that happened during his sleep. I didn't really buy it all too much, but anyways, he wasn't feeling 100%. Is that maybe also what we have to conclude today, that it was maybe not 100% and that he was just that he was good enough to be up there and fight, but he was just not good enough to get that victory eventually.
It happened in his sleep. What am I hearing? Did his bed frame crack because he's too jacked up now and he all of a sudden hurt his rib? I don't know. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. There were indeed
It was during the race. They were during the race. There was an interview. I don't know who it was, but they interviewed him and he was talking about Thibaut Nys, that he felt something at his left rib or something, and this is a true story. But there were excuses.
I believe you, Issam, but it's quite typical because you sent me a message from before the race, which was on Sporza, that Thibaut Nys said, I don't know how I'm feeling. The legs were okay, but I haven't been able to find my groove on this course. We'll see during the race how much I give for the title. And that was already kind of seeming like they were maybe realizing that starting your season 1 week before the European Championships is not ideal. It's, to me, clear that he lacked race rhythm today. For the first 35-40 minutes, I thought this race could easily go two ways for Nys. He could either have been a clear example of a rider who grew into the race, played a tactical masterclass, didn't really do anything wrong, then is there in the last lap and played a really good game of cards. He bluffed, he stayed back, minimal effort. At the same time, I could have also easily seen at some point this race going the other way for Thibaut Nys, where he easily got dropped if he didn't make that first 4 and then just falls out of the top 10. So, was he not good enough? I think that's right. Nobody was as good as Toon Aerts today. Aerts had a phenomenal day. Thibaut Nys was hurting in the final 2 laps. You could see it in the accelerations. He's the type of rider that then in the final lap pulls something out of the bag to perform even better. So, in that sense, he probably just needs to conclude that Aerts was stronger today. We can discuss it long or short that Thibaut Nys should have made a different type of approach to the final lap. Maybe he should have hit the sand section on the beach first. He didn't. He made his overtake there too early or couldn't keep the pace high enough after his dive bomb by pit 1. He could potentially have made another decision, keep the pace high out of the penultimate corner onto the tarmac. We can discuss that long or short, but at the end of the day, I don't think it matters. Thibaut Nys on paper should be a faster sprinter than Toon Aerts. That he didn't have the legs to come around signals to me that he didn't have the legs and that this is what he needs to settle for. He's losing the European Champions jersey. I don't think he's going to be too sad about that. He can now wear the Belgian Champions jersey, and in Belgium that one is worth probably 3 times as much as this European title. So that's my conclusion about Nys. If we look a bit further down, the other fight for the podium was in the final lap between Wieseuren, Mason and Ronhaar. Wieseuren coming out on top, I would argue, mostly deserved. He kind of like Nys was hanging in there, then pulled something out of the bag. Perhaps Ronhaar would have deserved it more over the race, but today I don't feel like being too critical on Ronhaar. The Dutch staff, a few times I heard them shouting, hey, take it easy, son, don't take the lead. You shouldn't be doing this, watching from the big screens when he placed another attack. Yes, he was active, but at the same time, he was one orange guy against 3 Belgians. With Van Toerenhout up there so early on, it did seem to me like there were some sort of team games being played. Not necessarily hard team games, but in that sense I could understand why Ronhaar was super eager to be in first or second, because he was scared that at some point there would be an actual team tactic move pulled on him and he would be totally cooked.
Yeah, there was, I think Wieseuren was definitely playing the ideal fellow countryman, because Van Toerenhout was at certain points trying to pull, then Nys was behind him. He signaled like take over. Nys was not really keen, didn't even look at him that much, and Van Toerenhout was a bit agitated by it. But there were some team tactics. I felt like Ronhaar in the beginning of the race was making more mistakes, or at least the mistakes that he was making, you could really look at them and say that, those were somewhat mistakes. But the later we got into the race, and especially when he was in that situation with Wieseuren, Thibaut, and also Michael Van Toerenhout, then he becomes more difficult, and then he actually had to, be more active, because Van Toerenhout was very keen to leave a gap if it was Wieseuren in front. I felt that he maybe I'm not really sure, but there was a moment where Nice actually attacked, and Ronhaar was the one that chased him. I felt that was maybe a moment where he could actually try and leave the gap. It is going to be a difficult situation because you're you're not a fellow countryman of Nice. It's your teammate, but that's all. It's your commercial teammate. But I felt that he could have tried it there because I think that Van Toerenhout would have been keen enough to eventually chase. I don't know, but he could have tried it because Van Toerenhout was at that moment really thinking that he was going to be able to pull it off or at least be in a fight for a podium. He was riding quite confidently, using a lot of power, which I guess eventually he just didn't have enough left in the tank. And, that last lap was definitely not what I expected. And he fell through the field quite hard, eventually finishing in 10th.
The collapse of Van Toerenhout was quite surprising, but also an attribute and element to how tough this course was. It was not an easy ride by the means of it, and I think that also shows in the riders that eventually ended up in the front. It's what we predicted. The sand riders didn't really come to the forefront today. It was not that decisive. It was mostly running. There was a big rut in that downhill of the dune, which kind of limited the running by the time the many elite went, but along the shore, how much shore there even was. That section was way too short. They shortened the sand compared to the Belgian championships there. So, yeah, it is what it is. And in the end, look at the riders at the front. Cameron Mason coming to the front also should signal Issam just how hard this course was. Same for Emil Verstringen. All these riders came to the front due to their engine. And Mason, honestly, impressive in those final 2 laps. I don't really think he could have done anything different to change the outcome of this race. He seemed quite cooked to me. He made those attempts in the final 2 laps to position himself well, but he just fell short in terms of legs, and that's definitely not a shame if you look at the riders he was up against there, especially considering all the work Mason needed to do in the chase. His start itself wasn't that bad, but his second lap wasn't good. I'm not sure if anything happened. I was not near a big screen in that lap. Did anything happen to him in the second lap, Issam?
I cannot tell you. I cannot recall, to be honest. Did something happen to him? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I have to look back, but that's not gonna help the episode. But I think that what I can say on Mason, that in the last 2 laps, he was cooked. He was happy to be there, and he was still trying to make some moves, which I really respected, because you could see his facial expression was saying it all. He was happy to be there, and that was all. He tried to make some moves left and right, but eventually, I think he maximized his result. He was able to be sort of in that battle for a potential podium. But it was, he just fell short, and he just didn't have enough left. And yeah, that's, he can still look back at a very strong race. And as you said, I think him being in the top 5 kind of shows as well that for sure the sand played a role, because I think you could definitely make a mistake, which costs you then some energy. But eventually it was also like, do you have the legs? Do you have good form? And that played also a huge role on this course. And that definitely brought him back into the race, being able to actually have something left in those last couple of laps to both bridge the gap and be in the leading group, and also trying to hang on and making the most out of it. So I think that he can definitely be happy with this result. Looks good. And as I said before about him, is I just I hope that he can continue that and have solid results, less of those results that dip, and more of the ups, and more of these type of results where he's actually able to mix it with the very best, and that's where he belongs, in my opinion.
Let's look at the entire top 10 then. Belgian podium, Aerts, Nijs, Viseur. It saves their championship because until that point it had been very dire. Ronhaar, first Dutch rider, in 4th place with Cameron Mason in 5th. Emil Verstringen was 6th ahead of Mees Hendricks. Jente Michels, Felipe Orts and Michael van Toerenhout complete the top 10. Disappointments of the day. Van Toerenhout, it almost looked like he bonked, like he had a Jan Ulrich moment, forgot to eat, he completely plummeted down. Zweek, 11th, also disappointing. The course, despite being hard, should have been good for him. It was fast. He said beforehand that he hadn't been hiding, he just hadn't been feeling good in recent weeks, didn't really have an explanation. That trend continued. Joris Nieuwhuis, not good today, had not a great day is simply what he said afterwards. Unfortunate for him. And then Niels van der Putte, 21st today, a horrible day out for him. But in contrast, a very good day today for Mace Hendricks, Issam.
I was like, when is it going to stop for Mace Hendricks? Because he was actually, getting along with this course, I guess. And for a moment, I was like, because he was somewhat, at some point, he was the one leading that group behind the four. He was leading them out. And I thought, oh, he's a bit too eager. He's probably having a good day. He feels good. But that could really cost him, because at that point, I think he had like 5-6 riders in close proximity. And that is... It could be fatal, because if you are going to drop down a little bit, it could actually be that those 4, 5, 6 riders are going to be able to take your position, and that would have been, potentially outside the top 10. But he held his own quite well, and I think he had just a very good day. He was on it from the start. He had a very good start. He was able to... I think he profited a little bit from that start, but nevertheless, he was able to really get into this race, and he comes from somewhat a poor period, which was not really due to himself, but due to circumstances, illness, not feeling well, and I think that is an incredible way to bounce back for him. He was definitely deserving of that result and made the most out of his day, and I think for him as well, he can look back and be very satisfied with the results, because I think beforehand I wouldn't have put him in 7th, so he, and I don't think he would have done it himself. He knows, of course, how good his form is, but I definitely think that he can be happy with it.
Let's move on then to the women's under 23 race, the second race of the day. That one was not thrilling at all, in sharp contrast to the men's elite race. Unfortunately, Leonie Bentveld opened a gap in the first lap and was never seen again. Célia Géry was hanging at 5 seconds in the first lap, then crashed going into the sand. She was already dealing with a back injury sustained from a crash before the Koppenberg cross. She slipped on the stairs to the race entry and hurt her lower back. It's been very stiff. She this morning thought about not starting the race, is what the French team told me afterwards. They told her, just try it, you're here anyway. It resulted in a silver medal, because after 2 laps she was able to turn it around. That crash probably hurt her back a little bit more. She finished second. Third place went to Amandine Muller. She crashed in the first corner. It took some time for her to lock in, but in the penultimate lap it finally happened. She was hanging behind Chenille de Schoesitter and Bloemen Kalis for a while, not able to pass them. At some point, Francois, the French coach, I saw him hanging, and I was live streaming the race for you at that point, Issam, so you must have seen it as well. He was like hanging all the way over the fence. Allez Amandine, à pied, accélérez! Encouraging to place a running attack, she overtook the Schoesitter and Kalis, and from that point she could finally utilize her power, her running abilities, and just being a better rider than the other two, and securing bronze in the end.
Cyclocross and having a turn 1 that is, I wouldn't say idiotic, but it's kind of stupid. It's almost impossible to not have such a thing, and I don't understand. I didn't like that turn 1, the way they had to go up that hill. It caused for trouble for certain riders, and it can really somewhat make or break your day, and I don't think a turn 1 should be that. It should just be able to, the riders are able to negotiate it. I guess you can never really get a clear path, but at least it's going to be easy enough for the riders to get through, and from there on they can have all the corners and all that. But anyways, that's me ranting a little bit on that first turn. I think that I said something along the lines of Bentveld has to drop Géry and be able to get alone, and I think circumstances must have helped that as well, but it was, Bentveld was able to clear, and then from there on she was able to build on the gap, and it didn't look comfortable, but it was comfortable. She was able to pull it off, and hats off, because these are kind of the results that you kind of need in this, in her moment of her career, that you have that title now. It's something that no one is able to take away, and it's good. You don't want to be remembered as someone that now all of a sudden Jerry is just coming in and takes the title. So I think that is it's good. She kind of deserves this as well, because she had been going quite well this season. And we were right about the players, because we kind of thought that it was going to be between these three in terms of the podium. Jerry and Bentveld for the first two places, and Muller was definitely the one that we were looking at as number 3, and that almost didn't go the way it should be going, but she eventually was able to fight back, and on merit was able to get herself back into that third spot. And I think that is somewhat where it stands right now with the riders that started today, that that is how it kind of developed. And I don't know, should we maybe be a little bit thankful that the Schuster was not able, she would probably have loved to be on the podium, but man, if she was on the podium, I think the articles from the Belgian media about the development of on the women's side, how good it all is and all that, I think you can probably dream those articles better than I can.
A blessing in disguise. Trust me, that 4th place is a blessing in disguise, because not just is a large portion of the best U23 riders still missing here. We don't have riders like Gladanova. We don't have Backstedt. There's so many riders missing here. Lopez de San Roman will be there at the World Championships. There's going to be so many more top riders here that the results here, the middle of the pack and some of the top riders here are just missing. And as a result, there's a lot of riders that have the opportunity to perform well here. But Jana Glaus, with all the respect, I don't think this is a name we will see in the top 10 of many U23 results this year, even when we filter them. And that's nothing to take away from the hard work she put in. I'm just taking her name as an example. But the field here was not that thick. We discussed that in our preview. We've said there's basically 3 names, and anything else is kind of grasping for riders that could potentially fill up a spot on the podium. That's also what it was, because Muller, despite that crash and despite her hiccups and unableness to kind of secure that 3rd place from that group, and that happening in the final 2 laps, she still opened a gap of nearly 45 seconds in those final 2 laps. So she definitely deserved that on a course which didn't really suit her. For Muller, the sand riding skills were definitely a issue for her. It definitely hampered her throughout the race. Jerry, I think I just come back to the back, and that is a valid reason. So we will see how that kind of improves throughout the rest of the season. You're right about Bentveld, and we're kind of not having much order in this here. We're just jumping all over the top riders, and that's also how it was. I streamed this entire race to you, Issam, and it was just one rider, then a gap, one rider, then a gap, another rider, 2 riders together, gap. So that was a battle for the win, which was not really a battle. Bentveld needs this win. Jurgen Mettepenninger was way too delighted for the type of performance it was, telling people that this was really a sign that Bentveld is one of the premier talents, and in a way he's right, but in another way, I don't see Bentveld as a rider who's going to be a future World Cup winner. She might throughout her career win a World Cup race or 2, but I don't see her become a big winner. There's too many other talented riders. I think Jerry is already more talented than she is. Muller also making inroads. So what you see sometimes at these championships, especially when they're organized in the Netherlands and Belgium, is that you get these courses that really suit the Dutch-Belgian riders. That's not a reason to not race here, don't get me wrong, but the courses here, when we go to Koksijde or when we go to Oostende next year for the World Championships, Hulst even this year is relatively technical. It's just harder for the non-Dutch Belgian riders to perform. So that helped the Schuster. Her sand riding today was really good. She was really happy with the result, as she should be. I think, to me, perhaps the most surprising rider in the result, not necessarily a huge surprise, but Bloemen Kales. She already finished 10th, I believe, in Essen this year. She's made big steps, and she showed that today with a very good ride. She was very happy with the result after the race in the mixed zone. So those are kind of my takeaways here, Issam. For the rest, I think we've been over Molengraaf and Langebarg enough, and we don't need to give them a roasting or a beating or anything today. Perhaps something, Hladíková and Gottwaldova where we expected, but Elisa Ferry relatively strong for a first year, if we are grasping at things to discuss here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was for Ferry was definitely a solid outing. I think that it was somewhat expected where the Czech riders finished, and as you said, I think it is you should not be kicking someone when they're already down. I think for Molengraaf it's it's not the greatest of results, and it hasn't been the greatest of forms that she has been on. And for Langenbarg, it's I think a bit different because she's just now entering in a difficult phase in her career, kinda, because you know that under 23 it's difficult to manage and to manage yourself in that, and some have just more adaptation problems than others, so we have to see how that will develop. But yeah, I think for Ferry, definitely noticeable result, strong ride from her, and Bloemekalis was also for me somewhat a surprise, so that's interesting and something to take with you, because these races also, an under 23 race is always just a bit different, and it's difficult to go on this result because it's just so atypical. We barely have these kind of races, which I mean I would probably love to see at least one or two races that are similar to this on the calendar, to be honest. But anyways, but yeah, it still indicates some sort of form, and you can go off it a little bit. So yeah, interesting to take with me, I guess, for the next couple of races, and also in terms of expectations.
Let's move to the men junior category then. I had expected perhaps more of a battle for this one. It quickly turned into a three-way battle. Already in the second lap, Gilles Lejeune had set a pace which was followed by Patrick Petzorozola, Filippo Grigolini and Tilano Here. Here was quick to drop. Cas Timmermans came back from a relatively bad start, a common fallacy for him, a big problem for him that is, but that was that. Those three riders were up front. Lejeune was better on the technical sections, but he couldn't really compete against Grigolini. Grigolini was just the most powerful. He and Petzorozola kind of took turns attacking, not really playing any team games, but it was more just Rozola attacked, then he attacked again, then Grigolini decided it was a turn. Lejeune was backed into a bit of a corner. He is not a super powerful rider, and that showed today. He did his best. His sand skills are really, really good. I recall that from Zonhoven last year, where in the Kuil he was so quick, but he just couldn't keep up against Grigolini, who broke clear in the penultimate lap when Lejeune made a small mistake. Lejeune then fell back to Petzorozola and lost out that sprint, so it was Grigolini coming in ahead of Petzorozola. Italian 1-2, Federa Italia, a very successful weekend for them. 2 titles and 3 total medals, number of additional top 10s, and then, no, I say that wrong, 4 medals. 4 medals, they also medaled in the women junior category, where actually there was a disqualification for an Italian. Pelliciotti got disqualified. She was racing the new Guerciotti Vito. Those bikes got UCI approved on Friday, but her bike didn't have a sticker on it, so her bike was deemed illegal. I knew that they were lodging an appeal, but I haven't heard anything from it, so I'm just going to consider that a unsuccessful appeal and a minor remark on what was for the rest a good weekend for the Italians.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that they have with Petzorozola and Grigolini, they have 2 riders there on the men junior side that could get quite far this season, and it's definitely on the up for them. I don't want to go in too much on riders at this age, but with Gilles Lejeune, I have a feeling. Should I be calling the fraud police in a way? Because, man, before this race, I thought, he was winning. And sure, he wasn't winning against the competition that he was facing today. But I honestly thought that he had the chance pulling it off. And he did not deliver. And you kind of said it already, technically is good, and that was also something that we saw last year, that he technically is definitely someone that knows how to handle his bike. But do you still see that deficit in terms of power output and just not being able to bring something to challenge those Italians? Or and do you see that maybe also that there will be something in courses where it might be a little bit more technical? Or how do you see that in a way? How the how they are looking at the moment, the riders, in terms of the differences?
Don't call the fraud police on him, because I think you have just read quite a lot of Belgian newspapers, and in Belgium they were convinced that Gilles Lejeune is going to become a rider with a unbeaten and invincible season, winning all these World Cups and world titles. The amount of fans that this guy has is insane. This guy has more fans than Michael van Toornhout and Elisabeth combined. Everywhere where I was walking on the beach, there were people with supporter of Gilles Lejeune jackets. I don't know what I was witnessing. They were going crazy for this guy. This guy is a second-year junior. There's people carrying around flags with his head on it. I don't really recall anything like this other than for Thibaut Nys. And that was because many people supported him because he had a TV series and they liked his dad, who was a famous cyclist. But Gilles Lejeune, I don't really know what to make of it. But that also adds to the narrative, because in the mixed zone, the journalists were also asking that to him, like, Gilles, what did you think of the fans? Yeah, there were a lot of fans. I almost got a deaf tone in my ear because they were so loud screaming my name. That was something else. And I mean, most people only came out for the men elite race today. That was when it was at the busiest. But all the people that were there for the men junior, most of them seemed to be there for one guy, Gilles Lejeune. And yeah, what does this mean for the rest of the season? It means that the competition will be stiff. Grigolini, Pezzorosola, we don't really see this as a surprise. Grigolini finished on the podium of the World Championships this year. Pezzorosola was also up there until he crashed. He finished on the podium in Hoogerheide. We discussed them extensively in those two podcasts that, again, the Italians had done it. They'd found these talents. They'd come to the front despite not really being present that season. So now they've done it again. This is the third year in a row after Viezzi, Agostinacchio. We are now here with Grigolini and Pezzorosola. At some point, you would hope that an Italian sponsor steps in, because if you put all these Italians into a cyclocross team, you're going to have one hell of a team, really. Of course, they also have other ambitions, and Agostinacchio is on the road, so this is more hypothetical, but you have to credit the program, and that's an interesting contrast to see. Italians, France, they have these programs, same as the Czechs, where they have these two coaches. Normally one is pre-riding, one is more casual. These are the skills coaches, one from the side, one from the bike, and then they have the national team coach also coordinating and coaching from the side. The Dutch and Belgians also have kind of similar setups, but not necessarily with all this on-bike coaching going on. But it's interesting to see how these countries really invest in their coaching staff, and how that stands in contrast to some other big cyclocross programs that don't really have skills coaches and mainly invest in having a huge fleet of mechanics. Where today, for instance, I also spoke with the Lithuanian coordinator, who was just there by himself. He had 5 riders with him, and it was just him. In the pits, it was just him. He was finding people to help him bring the stuff to the pits. So, of course, big contrast in terms of money, and Lithuania doesn't aspire to be at the same level as Italy, but that was just an interesting observation from these championships here.
You want to conclude?
Well, I think then concluding final remarks here on the men junior. The Dutch outing was phenomenal. They placed all of their riders in the top 12, 6 riders in the top 12. The Dutch coach was standing near me at some crossing, Gerben de Knecht, and he said that it was tough for him to make the selection because there was one guy who was right on the bubble, and he said, yeah, this guy, he's now sitting at home watching this thinking, damn, if I had a good day I could probably finish in the top 10. And that must have been hard for him to make that decision for the coach, and hard for that rider. I can't really come at his name right now, but that was definitely something that was interesting to see how strong the Dutch were, with a lot of first years up there. Then I have one interview to play. Michael Hettiger, a Austrian rider, finished 6th, and I spoke with him after the finish. Michael, today a 6th place for you. Are you happy with that result?
Yeah, to be honest, my goal was kind of top 10. Reached that, so had a pretty shit start. So I'm really happy with the result, but yeah, third start but wasn't just enough to get to the front group. Yeah.
The course here was fast with a bit of sand. Would you say that suits you?
I wouldn't say that's that, because it's kind of the opposite what suits me, because in Austria we don't have sand, so I don't have any experience in sand except Zonhoven last year. And I'm a lighter rider, so I need some hills, and there are none. So kind of the opposite what I wanted, but I'm happy with the result.
So do you think later this season you can aim for even higher on courses that suit you more?
Yeah, I think my season goal is Tabor for the cyclocross season. It's also going to be my last race, and then I'm going to prepare for the road and mountain bike season.
Okay, thank you, and good luck in the rest of the season.
Thank you.
Closing remarks then here, Issam. The French today, underwhelming in the men junior. There was a crash in the first corner, which took out Soren Le Pen and one of the top favorites, Søren Bruyère-Joumard. Joumard, I think, also didn't have the best day, but it certainly didn't help that he was in 50th position after the first corner. By the second time check, he was 35 seconds down. Then at that point, it's really hard to lock in, move your way through the traffic, and also kind of fight your way back. So that was unfortunate for him. I will say, I enjoyed my time in Middelkerke. I wonder, it has its up and its downs, right? Like, there were some military checkpoints to get into the course with your press car. The way everything was organized around there, around the barracks, wasn't amazing. It was really hard to move around. These crossings were near enough impossible to cross. They just kept them closed. The section with the beach not being part of the course and free to access meant that it was completely clogged up there, working with a stamp instead of a wristband because they only printed 150 wristbands for people to go to the beach. That definitely made things tough. I missed the finish of the woman junior yesterday due to that in the first race. After that, I adapted. Had its ups. The press parking was super close. The press room was super close. So it has its ups and its downs. But the way I could hear it, this would probably be the last time that they raced here, because with increased investment in defense spending, increased geopolitical tensions with Russia, they are not really keen on opening up these venues anymore, which is why Koksijde is also moved off the military base. At the same time, it also tells you how big cyclocross is in Belgium, because where else can you ride your bike on a military terrain? Where do they open up a military terrain for a cycling race? A cyclocross race only in Belgium.
There you have it. I really enjoyed the racing as well. I think that I would say that I did definitely not expect certain things happening in the race, but that is, as it is with a championship, there is always going to be some surprises. I think that I definitely enjoyed the course more than I thought I would. And the racing itself, it was different. We got definitely different scenarios, which is not always the case at a championship. It's at times that you get a championships with almost every category with the same scenario. So I think that was definitely also interesting to see. And I was also surprised by the amount of people that showed up on the Sunday race. I didn't expect that, and it was it definitely made it also the atmosphere and all that. It made it also more interesting. So I enjoyed the races, or at least the races that I was able to watch, and thank you for live streaming the Women Under 23 race. I truly appreciate that, and overall I think the elite races were a good watch. One not as exciting as the other, but both were definitely a good watch, and I think that from now it feels like we are in the second phase of the season, because now that World Cup is coming up. And it feels like from there on we're going into this new moment that we are having in the season, and maybe the cards are going to be shuffled. Who knows?
Who knows? Certainly the conditions are likely to change as well. This might be the last fast race in a while. I don't know what Neil will be like, but I will give you a few other results still. There was racing in Spain today in Ormastegui. Clément Horny took the win there ahead of González Macho and Mario San Milan. In the women's elite race, it was Anne Morichon winning ahead of Sara Cueto Vega and Lea Stern. The funny thing there is that in the men junior category, one of the best juniors, Benjamin Noel Suarez, who's already signed with Ineos, took the win. He was not here in Middelkerke, so that was funny. And then yesterday, the Pan American Championships in Washington, D.C. Andrew Strohmeyer taking the title ahead of Eric Brunner and Jules van Kempen. Women elite title going to Lizzie Gonzalez. Flaming start to the season for her. Maghalie Rochette in second with Sydney McGill third. U23 titles went to Henry Coote and Mia Asseltine. Junior titles to Noah Skolnick and Ada Linton. Good. That brings me to the final remarks. We're nearing the hour mark on this recording. First of all, Massive shout out to the 3 British fans that recognized me during the weekend and came up to say hello. Very much appreciated. Always cool to actually find out that there's people listening to this podcast and it's not just you and I going crazy. And of course, thank you as well for your time, Issam.
Absolutely, and thank you for being there on the ground. And I appreciate it. It was great. I was having fun. I'm still having fun, and we hopefully are going to have fun for the rest of the season. So thank you for having me.
We will be back very soon. On Tuesday, there is racing in Niel, and we will be here to discuss it, the 3rd round of the Super Prestige. Thanks everyone for listening. Catch you guys in just a few days for more racing. See you guys then. Goodbye.